Once upon a chalkboard, we all had beliefs we clung to. Maybe it was the method we dismissed because it sounded too trendy, or too techy, or too fluffy to actually work. But then something shifted. A student comment, there was an exceptionally challenging term, or even a global pandemic. And that technique you swore you'd never use. Now it's a cornerstone. Welcome back to the What and Who of EDU, where we bring you insights from the leading educators, researchers, and innovators who are shaping the future of teaching and learning. On our podcast, we share real-world classroom strategies that help you create a more impactful and effective learning environment. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone, and today we're spotlighting 10 tips from educators as they share the teaching moments that once raised eyebrows, but now raise engagement, retention, and yes, even grades. And if you'd like to learn more about them, their bios are there in the show notes. For now, let's put our assumptions aside and find out more about these techniques that might seem slightly sus, but definitely deliver. Teaching Method 1. Lectures can be boring, so give yours a glow up. Some teaching methods don't need to be thrown out. They just need a little structure. Dr. Margaret Holloway, Assistant Professor of English and Composition Coordinator at Clark Atlanta University, didn't abandon lectures. She reinvented them.
Definitely lectures and just having a more organized version of my lecture. I can get up and just kind of ramble, and I used to do that a lot. But having a formal presentation to present to my students while I elaborate on whatever it is I've put on those slides definitely helps rather than just standing in front of the class and talking. It gives them something to focus on visually, and it keeps me on track as well. So I have an agenda for every class session. I need to do a number of things. And if I'm able to follow a presentation, I'm able to keep myself on time. I'm able to complete everything on my to-do list for the class session and also make sure that my students are focused. So yeah, there's some good in lectures. I think I just had bad experiences as a student in those big lecture halls. But they are definitely beneficial, and my students definitely rely on them now.
In other words, no more, wait, what was I just talking about? Moments. Just focused and purposeful teaching with a side of visual engagement. Teaching Method 2. Enjoy the silence and let the awkward pauses do the work. From lectures that talk at students, we turn into silence that gives them space. Associate Professor of Economics and Faculty Fellow at Gonzaga University, Dr. Ryan Harzog, used to fear those awkward pauses when students didn't answer. Now he sees them as space-making, confidence-building, and downright pedagogical.
I don't know if I doubted it. I just never felt comfortable doing it, is the silence. When you ask a question and you know some of the students don't know the answer, but inevitably a number of them do, and you get that silence in the classroom. And I know some instructors swear by it, right? They just wait and wait and wait and wait for an answer, and they will do it and they'll get it. And it certainly encourages more engagement from the students if they know you're just not going to run in and answer that question. And so if you want to create an environment where students are answering questions and are engaging, you need to be patient in that classroom environment and be okay with 30 seconds, 20 seconds of quiet. And so that method to me is one that I just have a hard time embracing. They don't want there to be quiet, but recognize that creates an environment for students to be engaged in the classroom.
It turns out those 20 to 30 seconds of quiet are the sounds of brains actually working. Depeche Mode would remind you here that words are very unnecessary. Teaching method 3, scaffold, because Rome wasn't built in a draft. Sometimes there's the sound of silence, and sometimes there's an empty screen, because writing doesn't come naturally to all students. Jennifer Duncan, Associate Professor of English at Georgia State University's Perimeter College, is on team one sentence at a time.
Even when I was a freshman in college, I remember writing was something that came easily for me. And so I thought that good writers could just sit down and write their essay and be done with it. And then as an instructor, because I'm so overwhelmed, I thought, well, I'll just have them write an essay and then I'll look at it and give them feedback and then they'll revise it and it'll work like that. And that does not work at all. And now I have figured out how to structure my classes so that they turn in like one piece at a time, sometimes just one sentence at a time. And I swear by it because they're more successful. I can look at a tiny piece of their work a lot more quickly and get them feedback on it more quickly. Then they can move to the next step. And my students don't like to revise, but they don't think of this now as revising because they didn't build this yet. If they just turned in their thesis statement and I gave them feedback on it, and now they fix that thesis statement while they add their outline, and I look at that again in 5 minutes instead of 5 hours when I had to grade their essays before, then this little frequent check-ins, frequent affirmations or redirections, it just makes things a lot more successful for them. And I did not realize it and in the past, and I would have said it wasn't the case, but now I swear it makes things faster for an instructor.
Her students don't think of it as revising anymore because they're never tearing anything down. They're just adding bricks with the blueprint in their hands because scaffolding is for more than coliseums and Rome wasn't built in a draft. Teaching method 4. Short form is the new 5-page paper. From one sentence at a time to one paragraph at a time every single day. Mary Gurley believes her students should write original content regularly. The Gaston College psychology instructor explains how short-form writing helps both her and her students.
I think I've always been skeptical of long papers, and I'm still skeptical of long papers, but I think writing is not something that you need to be skeptical about. Students need to write every single day, in my opinion, in the classroom, online. They need to be producing original content every single day. But I do not think that that needs to be in the form of papers. I can see longer, not short answer, but like a extended short answer, I think is way more valuable than I had given it credit for in the past. And AI has helped me feel better about that. I can grade more effectively with AI now, looking at paragraphs of students that they're writing, whereas I didn't have the time to do that, grading over 300 of those. Now I can. So I've become more open. And I'm seeing the results, especially like in some of my gender classes and things like that. Like I can see like, oh, wow, they really are thinking. And so I think that's something that's changed for me is being able to give feedback to students about what they're doing.
Students don't need long papers. They need daily brain reps. And with AI speeding up the feedback loop, she can see them getting stronger. And outside of class, we write emails, posts, and texts a lot more than we write paragraphs and papers. Teaching method 5, ungraded work. Students need a point, not a point system. So tech can help with grading, but here's a wild idea. What if some assignments didn't need a grade at all? Julie Moore, senior online academic advisor, first-year composition coordinator, and award-winning poet, used to believe in the gospel of grading. But plot twist. Once she stopped with the scores, her students focused on the work and actually started thinking more.
I used to think that everything had to be graded. And if it wasn't graded, then students would just not do it. But I've now learned many different techniques for motivating students, and that sometimes using a grade to motivate students is the least effective means to get them engaged. It's okay to have assignments and not grade them, but rather to have them come in and have students discuss them. So you're not grading it, but it becomes a means for group discussion. or some other means of engagement for the students. And that's the same with writing too. There can be ungraded writing assignments. I think of, for instance, self-assessment kinds of assignments where students can take a moment at the end of class and write for 10 minutes about what were the most important things they learned about in that class session, or assessing what they believe are their own strengths and weaknesses in their own writing. For instance, what professors might do in a portfolio at the end of a semester or things like that. So yeah, not everything has to be graded, or at least not everything has to be given letter grades and points. It could just be you get credit for doing it.
Self-assessment, reflection, portfolio work. Now, that all sounds like authentic assessment to me. Because while students don't always need a point system, they almost certainly need a point. Teaching method 6. Let the tech so you can teach. Now, if you're thinking ungraded work sounds great, but who has time to read all that? Let me introduce you to the robots. And I know, EdTech can feel like a 4-letter word sometimes, but we've got 2 former skeptics who became believers. First up, Dr. Kristen Monroe, assistant professor of chemistry at Landmark College. She was pretty skeptical about automatic grading. And she's here to tell you exactly why.
I used to be really skeptical of automatic grading. I thought that students and my peers would say, oh, you're not doing your job because you're not grading. And I was also afraid of students getting stuck on problems and not feeling like it could come to me. But I've actually found that it promotes engagement because the student has a better idea of what types of questions they should ask me. It removes grading bias, and not just for there to be consistency, but it also removes that potential bias that exists between you and a student. The student no longer has that potential to say, oh, I got a bad grade because the professor doesn't like me. And in some cases, we actually sort of band together and fight against Achieve together because they're saying, oh, Achieve is wrong, instead of them pointing at me and saying, I'm wrong, which is kind of a cool moment. And I think that it also allows for grades to reflect content knowledge. Because Achieve automatically grades, the student doesn't have to hit submit or turn an assignment in, which can be a huge barrier for some students.
Surprise! Automatic grading did not replace her. It freed her up to actually teach. Students stopped saying, the professor hates me, and started saying, the bot is broken. But Dr. Monroe is not alone in her EdTech redemption arc. Dr. Kendra Thomas, associate professor of psychology at Hope College, spent years side-eyeing adaptive quizzing, until it became her secret weapon, that is.
The adaptive quizzing in the online portals is something that it took me years to really buy into. But I really like how they get students, how it's possible, like students like it, that it's low stakes and completion based. But since it's this like adaptive generative process, I can walk into a class knowing that students have at least played around with the information some. Even if they haven't read it in depth, the whole chapter, they've at least played around with some of the information. And I can give the lecture that I want to give instead of the lecture that I feel like I have to give, because I can assume they've already been thinking about it a little bit. It's percolated at least a little bit if they've talked about it. And so the adaptive quizzing, I've changed my tune on that.
2 teachers, 2 tools, same revelation. The tech is not here to replace you. It's here to free you up, so you have time. Monroe gets her grading time back. Thomas gets her students primed before class. And the robots, they're just doing the homework no one really loved anyways. Teaching method 7, flip the script, which is content at home and context in class. So if tech is handling the prep and the grading, what's left for class? According to Dr. Daniel Look, why, it's the very best part. The Charles A. Dana Professor of Mathematics at St. Lawrence University and author of Math for Cats, out this month, used to see flipped classrooms as a bad deal.
I don't know if I'd say I swear by it, and that's flipped classrooms. This is very much kind of a student perspective in some ways of you're being paid to teach this, and now you're not teaching it, right? I'm watching videos or whatever, instead of actually getting the benefit of this professor that I'm paying a lot of money for. And that's true if you don't set it up appropriately. But a well thought out flipped classroom setting offloads that. So much of what I'm doing, especially now with AI, you can just ask AI the right prompt and it'll spit out what I'm saying. And so am I really useful if I'm putting information at you that's readily available from other places? My real skill should be helping you wrestle with those ideas and figure out what they mean and work with them. In a traditional classroom, that's difficult to do. By the time you have explained the concept, you've left less room for actually engaging with the concept. So if you can offload that so that they come to the class knowing a certain thing, and you can do mini flipped. I mean, sometimes I'll record a 5-minute video, just a definition of a hard topic and some examples and say, think about this. And then I start class immediately. And even though it's a 5-minute video, they still come in more prepared than if I had just like talked to them, because they think about it. They wrestle with the idea a little bit. They may not do any active work, but in the background, they've been thinking about that concept. I think it's a brilliant structure if done appropriately. And if you're not also just adding on more work for the student, right? The student shouldn't feel like I have all the homework I would normally have, and now I also have to watch these videos. My idea of a well-designed flipped classroom, a bunch of the work that would have been homework gets moved into the class. And then you can work with them as they're doing the homework. And homework becomes practice, which is really what, in some ways, it should be.
Think of it as front-loading Netflix episode recaps so you can skip previously on and just jump straight into the plot twists. A 5-minute video buys 30 minutes of deeper thinking. And the homework doesn't just disappear. It moves into class where Dan can actually help them think through it. Teaching method 8. Turn the discussion board into the discussion board. So Dan's rethinking face-to-face time, but not every class is in person, and not every discussion needs to feel like a chore. Betsy Langness, psychology department head at Jefferson Community and Technical College, thought discussion boards were about as stimulating as a 7 a.m. Zoom on brain anatomy. But one tweak changed everything.
I think one of the things that I used to not like about teaching online was discussion boards and discussion forums. And I think maybe because I made my questions too generic versus being more specific and trying to just have some sort of topic that they could really expand upon with some of their knowledge, and that it was really a social learning context versus it just being, tell me 5 parts of the brain. No, tell me something you did today and what parts of the brain did you use? That is a lot more interesting to them and to me when I have to read 120 of those and to be able to answer those questions or make sure that they understand what they are doing. And I think it was just all about that knowledge sharing, and that it's more peer-to-peer interaction versus me telling them and then them telling me. And I think that changed because I got a lot of student survey feedback that, yes, I don't really like discussion boards or these video blogs, but they were really interesting and they did help me figure out, how to do something or how to really explain this concept.
Turns out the problem wasn't the discussion board, it was discussion bored. Because 120 posts just turned into 120 stories. And now her discussion board may just be the best group chat on campus. Teaching method 9. Learn together better with group work. When senior lecturer in the mathematics department, Dr. Amy Goodman, first started teaching math, she did what all of her professors had done before her: stand, deliver, repeat. And she was good at it. Her students wanted more than a well-crafted lecture. They wanted space to talk, to ask questions, and to math together.
Definitely group work. When I started teaching at Baylor in 1999, I taught solely as a sage on the stage. I lectured for 50 minutes 3 times a week and felt like I did a great job. And I mean, to be fair to me, that's how every math class I had ever taken in college and graduate school had been taught to me. So I thought that's how people do it. And it is a way, and it works for a lot of people. If that is your jam, no shade on lecturing. There are some people who are excellent public speakers and make a subject really come alive for students. I also found that over the years, I got a lot of feedback on my course evaluations that students wanted time to ask questions. They wanted to get to practice working problems on their own and get more feedback about that. So I started group work very gradually. I just started with flipped Fridays. So 1 day a week, they could work in groups and ask questions. And of course, now that's the foundation of my pedagogic strategies for all of my classes. And I think it works marvelously for them. I think students experience a lot of success in that, not just grade success, but they really walk away with a richer and more robust understanding of the course material because they had to engage it so often every day in class. So I definitely am a big proponent of group work.
Dr. Goodman didn't have a grand epiphany about collaborative learning. She started with flipped Fridays. Then group work took over because, shocker, it worked. And before you at her, yes, there are always students who hate group work. She knows, and she plans for it. Teaching Method 10, Multiple Choice Exams, Grading as a Growth Plan. Dr. Jennifer Ripley-Stickle, teaching professor in the Department of Biology at West Virginia University, thought multiple choice was the lazy way out because real assessment meant essays, critical thinking, and nuance. Then her students set her straight.
So I used to frown upon multiple choice exams, and I have totally changed my tune myself, but also from feedback I received from students. So what I have understood from students is that their lives are multiple choice exams. If they want to go to graduate school, professional school, any of those MCATs and LSATs that determine their lives are multiple choice exams. And so they want to practice taking multiple choice exams as an undergraduate so they're ready. And then when they finish graduate school, they're taking boards and all of these other tests to get their licenses or nursing and so forth. And again, that's a multiple choice exam. And the students have said if they had classes that had case studies and applications and what would happen if you removed this, if they were able to practice that as an undergraduate, they would have been way more confident in their futures and their other studies. And so that's what I have started to do. Multiple choice exams can be simple knowledge questions, but they don't have to be. You can really make them critical thinking and applying if you take the time to write a good multiple choice exam. So now all my classes are multiple choice exams. I may have a few short answer, but 2/3 are going to be multiple choice exams just so they get practice of weeding out answers and analyzing those types of questions.
In short, their futures are multiple choice. MCAT, LSAT, nursing boards. And her job wasn't to judge the test format. It's to make sure her students are ready when everything depends on filling in the right bubble. So, what did we learn today? That sometimes the teaching methods we once brushed off might actually work. From flipped classrooms to the sounds of silence, these aren't just instructional U-turns. They're glow-ups. Every educator in this episode changed their mind, and maybe, just maybe, they got you thinking about changing yours too. If this episode made you rethink that offbeat idea you've been saving for a quiet Friday, pass it along to a colleague, leave us a review, or scroll down to the show notes to learn more about the educators we featured today. And go follow them. And don't forget to tell us more about the method you've been side-eyeing. Share your ideas by leaving us a voicemail with your tips at 512-765-4688. And you might just hear yourself on a future episode. Until next time, I'm Marissa Bluestone, and this is the What and Who of EDU.